Hey, welcome back to our second portion of the assignment video. In this portion of the video, we will be actually drawing the first part of the perspective, and then we'll be coming in later with the last piece, which will include a variety of enhancements. So for now, what I want to do is I want to share with you that, as we expressed in the earlier video, that we need to start thinking about setting. We need to be thinking about how the object is going to be placed, and we have to do a little bit of planning. As a result, it's probably appropriate at this time to kind of do a little bit of maybe a planning sketch so we understand the relationships of the different things that are going on in the drawing. So as we do this, I'm just going to do a quick sketch so we can kind of get a sense of what's going on in the perspective. So as we do this, I'm just going to draw very roughly kind of a 6-square set of properties. Now, as I mentioned, this is, and we know, this is a small residence, and so it's entirely appropriate that it be set in a residential setting. So a subdivision or a neighborhood setting is what we would expect to apply to this drawing, and so as a result, I'm thinking about that in my planning exercise. So if this was a short block, this would be a street line coming along here, and so we'll mark that street. And this is going to be our subject property right here, the one right in the middle at the lower portion. We're not worried about these, but we do need to know kind of where those boundaries occur so that we can accurately or proportionally show how the placement of this building occurs on this lot and what's happening in the adjacent properties. So, as I mentioned, we have a street along here, along the lower piece, and then we have a set of properties, and bounded between the street and the properties will be a sidewalk. So we'll put in a horizontal line for the sidewalk, and this, since this is our subject property, I'm going to go ahead and just drop the building on where I think it kind of wants to be, and so that we can test it for placement more specifically as we're doing the drawing. But as I'm looking at this drawing, I'm kind of looking at it from the standpoint of the building being placed here. Now I'm going to put the ridge line in, and I'm going to go ahead and put in the chimney so we can kind of see that. So with this, we also have a back porch and some steps, and a front porch and some steps, and there's a solarium on this side, and so that's basically the structure. Not a lot of not a lot more complicated than that. But what we see is that we have a frontage and we have boundaries around it, and so as I look at our SketchUp model, I observe that the sides that are expressed or indicated are the solarium side and the porch side. So this side here and this side here are going to be those that we're going to want to focus on. We can't see what's behind this, so we're not going to worry so much about that. As a result, where we stand in terms of our viewpoint is principally on angle to the site. Okay, so we're now looking this way. That means we have a front corner, a left corner, or a vertical, and a right vertical, and those are represented in the model. So other things that we'll want to see, well, the property probably has a driveway that goes from the street onto the property where the person will park their car. So I'm just going to put in a little driveway here, not overly complicated, and it extends to the street. Then we have a landscape strip next to the property line. So here's the property line. And here's the back property line and the left property line. And everything else is happening at the street. Now, one of the other things that's occurring here is that the porch, you're not walking across the grass to get to the front sidewalk. It has its own porch sidewalk that extends to the street sidewalk or to the public sidewalk. And then possibly a little sidewalk between the driveway and the entry or porch sidewalk. So these are just some quick pieces. Now, we have a little bit of an inventory, and how much they have to affect the plan, we'll see how that works. But at least now we're starting to develop a checklist. We're also able to look at our drawing and say, what do we need to define the appearance of this thing properly? And so we can start to say, well, from a compositional side, I'm going to want something along the back of the property to kind of create the backdrop. I'm going to want, because the side property line also serves as a backdrop, because as we look this way, it's along the back side of the object that's primarily being viewed. And then we have a left side, which doesn't play so much of a factor, but the front sidewalk and front street view, a very prominent view. So those are our areas. As a composition, I want to spend time to develop that backdrop, which may end up being some landscaping across the back sides of the property, and possibly a focal point or an interest object in the front corner to act as a little bit of a frame. So I'm bounded by what's up close in the front, which will have some detail, what's in the back, which will have less detail on both sides. So now that we know kind of how our composition layout, we're going to take one other important view of this thing. And that is, as we are looking here, looking at the object, we're going to observe that there's a vanishing point on the left and a vanishing point on the right. And basically, those are going to run across the picture plane. So the picture plane is, as you will remember, that it is perpendicular to the line of sight, to the center axis of vision. So as a result, our left vanishing point is going to extend over to the left side and the right vanishing point to the right. So I'm going to mark that RVP on the right, put it out there just for fun. Do the same thing on the left side, LVP. Now I know that my projection lines are going to go those directions. Now, because our cone of vision isn't a full 180, we're going to hone in on that, and it's going to largely cover the area of the drawing. So the vanishing points are going to occur off the sheet, but the area of the drawing is going to happen on the sheet. So as we're looking at the drawing, we're going to end up with a cone of vision about like that. So that means that we're going to pick up some of the stuff on the right, some of the stuff on the left, but our main view is the main object, which is what we're really trying to deliver in this perspective. So it's good to keep this information available so we can go back and check our checklist of activities and content, and we'll come back to that a little bit later. Now, setting that aside, what we want to do is now pick up and prep the drawing. So as I mentioned in the earlier video, that we're going to need a larger sheet because the vanishing points are going to occur off the 11 by 17 drawing sheet that we're working on. But we still need to have that. So I've got some yellow colored trace paper here. It's the same as the white, it's just yellow colored, and it may help us to draw draw a distinction between the drawing sheet and the background sheet. So with that, I'm just going to set that onto my board. Okay. And I'm going to tape it down. Okay. And now, as we do this, we're going to want to establish on this, as I mentioned, the vanishing points. We're not going to be able to pinpoint them, but what we can start to do is establish a horizon line. So in the drawing, what we want to do is pick up that part of the drawing here. And for illustration purposes, because the pencil tends to be a little bit light, I'm going to go ahead and use a pen so it maybe punches a little bit more on the sheet. So what I want to do is I want to come up from the bottom of my drawing 3 or 4 inches. So I'm going to split that difference and say that's at 3.5 inches from the bottom of the drawing board, and that's going to place me about right here. Okay, I added a little bit extra in there. So, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and draw just a horizontal line. And I don't know where it's going to start and end on the vanishing point. We're not going to worry about that right now. We will find that out rather quickly, though. So we've identified the horizon line. We've got our sheet marked down. Next thing we're going to need to do is grab our model. And our model, SketchUp model, has a couple things that I think you need to do. It's got the main view object that we're working with, but it also has these little tick marks here and here. You can see them, a little dark mark. And so as you plot those aren't a mistake, those are an alignment tool. So I've provided that. So our goal is to align the tick mark on the horizon line. And so this drawing is now synchronized with the background horizon. And we're going to tape that down also. Okay. All right. So as a result, we now have the object on the background, but we have to place our vellum, which will give us kind of the picture plane that we were discussing just a few minutes ago. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and place the vellum in the drawing, on the drawing, and I'm going to move it or mark it slightly off center because that's just the way an interesting composition works better, is we don't center the main object but hold it slightly to one side. So I'm going to shift it to the left, maybe 2 or 3 inches off center, so that I have that set up, and it should work fine. Now we want to make sure that it's square, so please do the usual exercises that we have done in the past by making sure that it's square to your parallel and to your and/or T-square. And let's go ahead and tape it down also. Okay. Let's get these last bits here. We got 2 more corners to get. Very good. There's one. Here's the other. Okay, so now we can see the plant, we can see the elevation or the perspective block out underneath the vellum, so that's why we're using vellum. You could do this with trace paper also. In fact, I often use trace paper because it's a little bit more transparent and easier to see the lines below. But having done that, we're ready to kind of start. And the first thing we want to do is take a minute and trace the predominant features here that create the boundaries of the house. And so what do I mean by that? I mean the ground line where it meets the ground on the left side and the right side. The roof line on the left side, I would go ahead and draw in the eave line there. On the right side, we're going to have to do some thinking on how to get a horizontal projection line to the right, but we'll find that in just a minute. So let's just take a minute and go ahead and place that information on the drawing. And again, I'm going to work in ink because you can see it better. Unfortunately, the pencil is so light that makes it difficult to see. Okay, now let's go ahead and put in the roof slopes. Just kind of trace them in. Okay, now we're going to end up with a little bit of a point of intersection at the back here. So we want to watch where our elevation takes us. And it's going to take us back here somewhere. And then we're going to follow the same thing along the top of the house. Okay, so I'm going to do the ground line now. We're going to follow the front corner to the back corner. I would just set aside the solarium for now. It's not necessary, and you can see that it kind of drops down on top of the line there. Don't worry about that. Just extend the line from front corner to back corner. Same thing over here with the porch. It's going to do the same kind of thing. Follow the predominant length of line, and that should get you pretty darn close to where you need to be. Okay, so here, and I'm going to go ahead and put in the eave line. Might as well put that in. Okay, so our basic form is right there in front of us. Now, in this part of the process, we've got the plan on the drawing. I mean, we got that model on the drawing. And we can now do what I call reverse engineering. What that means is that with the horizontal lines and the horizon line, we can find the vanishing points. This occurs where those lines intersect the horizon line. So these projected lines are all going to project to the left, and the ones on the right will go to the right, and we'll see those in a minute, but we'll start on the left. And one of the things I wanted to share with you is that if it's not exactly precise, don't worry about. We're going to come to a pretty darn close location for a left vanishing point, and it will not affect the drawing's accuracy at all. It's as close as we need to be. So starting with this part of the drawing, we're going to extend a line, and we can use our either our parallel, or we can use our triangles like we did last time. Okay, so aligning the top, we're going to project along the line. We're going to extend it out, and once we get outside the line of the vellum, we're going to extend it to the horizon line, and we're going to stop it there. Okay, same thing along the bottom. We're going to line up the lower baseline, and we're going to extend it with the projected line from the baseline out to the vanishing point, or out to the horizon line. And then the last one we're going to do here is at the eave line. So we're going to follow that one as well. And we're going to go ahead and take that line to there. So it's kind of hard to see. We're right out here on the edge. But what I wanted you to observe is that it's not perfect. It's not going to be perfect. There's just enough distortion in the way the computer puts this together that those lines won't exactly line up perfectly, but that's okay. We're going to come so close that it's not going to matter. So looking at the lines here, you can see that the lower line wants to be a little bit more off. I'm going to let that one sit. I'm going to push my lines, my vanishing point out to be approximately where those two lines intersect the horizon line. And that's going to be my left vanishing point. I'm going to go ahead and mark that right there. And then I'm going to try the same thing on the right. Right's going to be a little tricky here, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But let's start with the idea that the baseline, as best as we can see, is going to project up along the up near the stair and then project out to the vanishing point or out to the horizon line. So as we do that, we're going to go ahead and we're aligning it here. Trying to make sure that's good. Okay. I'm going to continue our line out to here. And our first line is going to come over to this side. You can see it there. It's just a little bit off camera, but it's right close. Okay. Now, the top doesn't have an exact horizontal line like it did on the left side. The left side had 3 nice ones, but the right side does have some points we can look at. The top of the eave on both sides of this building are the same height. You remember that from the section drawing. And as a result, the top of that eave on both sides represents a projection line. So if we line up the top of the projection, the top or the point where it turns, you can see it turning right there, and it turns right there. If we take that point and run it from the center out to the right side, and then line up our triangle with that, or your parallel, you can find, make sure that's a little bit, there we go. You're going to find that that puts us out here, and that pushes us out just a little bit further again. So that kind of is consistent. I would come in maybe ½ inch or so from where it intersects, and that's a reasonable intermediate line that we're going to call the right vanishing point, and that should be helpful on that side. So now we have a left side and a right side by using the drawing and projecting out till we get to the horizon line, and then setting our vanishing points at that point. So that'll get us to a workable basic model, and that will, and in so doing, we still have not violated any of the rules that we established last week. All the verticals are vertical. All the horizontals, whether they're implied or physical, still project to their respective vanishing points. Because this part of the building faces the viewer, the right side goes to the right, the left side goes to the left. And as we'll see a little bit later, on the back side, the reverse happens. But we'll talk about that in just a bit. Okay, so as we move forward, we have the building on the site, and now what we need to do is think about creating a frame. How are we going to treat this thing in such a way as to give us a drawing that'll be interesting? So there's still some hardline boundaries we have to establish. If we think back to what happened in our little sketch exercise, we were able to determine that there were some elements happening around the site. The first being the street. So if we think about the street, we're not going to put the street right up on the porch line, although maybe in an urban environment it might be like that. In a suburban environment, which is, where most of us live out here, there's a front yard. So with the front yard, we're going to create a line where the street is and where the house, in respect to the house. And so to do that, we're going to use some, I'll call it some approach of proportionality. Now, from the standpoint of the drawing, we know that some of the elements are going to be coming off the house and going into the street and intersecting into that. And so we're going to see that in a minute. But we don't want the front yard of this thing to seem over-exaggerated, especially since we've kind of thought through the process on a little site plan. So some of this is using our eye and applying kind of a proportionality, what seems to be about right. And you can, if it's not right, simply erase it, redraw it till it feels like it's a more proportionate solution. So I'm going to use the vanishing point on the left, and I'm going to use that to line up my street view. And I'm going to go ahead and draw that line in and extend it to the vanishing point here. And this simply marks the edge of the street as relates to the property. Now I can extend that line on over this way as well, and we'll see what happens in a minute or two there. Okay, so now that's the edge of the street. There's the house. So what we want to do now is look at a couple other things. We want to think about let's use the approximation of the driveway as being right next to the house. So the driveway comes off the street and parks right next to the structure. So I can use this right corner right here and project, because it's because the driveway is on the back side of the image, we're going to use the right side projection to the vanishing point. So using my scale and triangle again, I'm going to line those up, and off that corner I'm going to project it till it comes to the street line. Extend that out just a bit more so it works a little better, and line it up on the corner. There we go. Looks good. Okay, so that's the driveway that is right next to the house. Then there's a second edge of the driveway that's a little further out. So the one thing we've got to remember is that the further out we get, the more the perspective flattens the object. So it's not going to be thick. It's going to be rather thin. So let's do a little proportionality there. Let's add that piece in and not extend it very far. Okay, almost there. Okay, so for purposes of this assignment, my driveway is only going to be about, my ink made a mistake there. Well, I'll have to clean that up later. Okay, so again, here's the edge of the inside edge close to the house. This is the outside edge of the driveway. And as we saw in the markup that we did, we've got a little planter strip right next to the property line. So we're just going to extend that on over. Again, just projecting from the left vanishing point. I think it may need a bigger triangle here in a bit. Okay. So this, right at the corner of the sheet of paper here, becomes the edge of the property. And so as a result, that means that the next property is adjacent to that. So we have property line, outer edge of driveway, inner edge of driveway. We have two more lines that are important. The line that is used to define the front porch sidewalk that extends from the porch to the sidewalk is also an important piece. So we're going to go ahead and draw that. Now we're going to use the because this side faces left, it's going to project to the left side, and so its backside is going to do the same thing. You'll see that in just a minute. Okay, so we line it up with the base of the we run from the left vanishing point through the bottom of the porch, and that gives us a projection line out to the street. And it's not very wide, it's very thin. So we're going to extend the next line to the next corner. So we found this corner. Now we're going to find this corner. Almost there. And what you're going to find, it's very thin, very tight. And there it is. Fix this line. It kind of disappeared on me a little bit. Okay. So we got a property line here, PL. We have an outer drive side here. Inner drive side here. We have an outer sidewalk edge right there and the inner one right here. So those are the lines that are projecting from the building out to the street, and we've projected them to the opposing line, or the opposing left vanishing point, and that's given us the line of directionality to the property or to the building. Okay, so we have a couple other lines that are important to put in here. One is that the street represents, as we mentioned, one line. There is a sidewalk line, and that sidewalk line is some width of the public sidewalk, and it's not overly large. It's some proportion, but we want to go ahead and put that in. I'm going to make it a little bit, but you have to eyeball it and think about maybe the sidewalks in and around your house, and that'll help you. That shifted up a little bit. Double check. Yep, we're good. Okay, we're going to continue that to the vanishing point. Again, in pencil, it might be easier than this pen approach, but you'll see what happens as we get a little bit further on. Okay. And we'll extend it down this way. Now, if you think about it, the joints in the sidewalk, and these sidewalks are not homogeneous, they have control joints in them. That's going to come off in the same way as these intersections came off. It's going to happen here too. The placement of them isn't critical, but you should try to think about them as being kind of evenly spaced because that's how they are in real life. And you don't have to spend a lot of time with them. My suggestion is just kind of eyeball it a little bit from, I'm going to use another triangle and do that later. But they will come and they will go to the left vanishing point, just as these did over here. So, all right, so what we have now is the major structure. And if you want, as we start to close this part of the video down, if you want to take a few minutes and trace in the windows and the porch and the stairs and the chimney and the windows and all that stuff, go ahead and do that because they'll just complete the drawing a little bit more. But you can see where we've gone with this so far. We've placed the object and all its details are on the drawing. They're landed on the site. We know our street edge. I might take just a minute here and add some thickness or some width to our street. I think I'll do that. That'll help us a little later down the road. We'll just go ahead and do that. And we want that being a little bit deeper. So let's go ahead. Okay. So actually, I'm gonna let's see. Is that good? I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna call that my center line of the street. I'm gonna nudge it a little bit further over. We may have to adjust this line. We'll see about that in just a minute. Okay. All right. So one of the things I wanted to reiterate as we were kind of moving beyond this piece is that we've got the basics down. Now there's a great deal of, I'll say, artistic expression that starts to come in the next phase. One of the things that is challenging to folks is getting the proportion just right. It's kind of a trial and error type of effort. You have to look at it and look around the world around you, kind of see how it functions and look at your own place and see how things are illustrated or how they represent themselves to your seeing, because we're going to want to illustrate those types of similar elements in our drawings coming up next. So as we do this, let's go ahead and close things down a little bit. With that, I'll say, why don't you take a break? We'll come back for the next piece of the instruction video. And with that, we can continue on towards the conclusion of the assignment. Thank you, and we'll see you in a couple minutes.